Welcome to the 2021 virtual convention. This session is part of the convention breakout program. Please note, this session will be recorded. You can protect your identity by limiting your participation in the chat and Q&A. Session recordings will be available within 24 to 48 hours after the session. When you enter a session using a desktop or laptop computer, you will be able to select your language on the left side of the page. Choose your language by selecting from the drop-down box. For English speakers, you will need to select English from the available languages in order to listen to the session in English. You will also need to mute the audio in the media player to prevent hearing two audio sources. The mute button can be found in the bottom left corner of your video box. Please note, if you use a mobile device, a smartphone or tablet, you will need to download a special app on your device to access the interpretation. Then you will need to enter the Interprify token included in the session description or abstract and enter the token in the app. You will have the option to use the questions and answers tab and the chat tab, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. There are a lot of attendees on this breakout, and we need to manage the flow of comments and questions. Chats and questions are welcome from all participants. Please use the chat tab for comments and general discussion. If you have a specific question for the panelists about the content, or during the designated Q&A period of the breakout, use the Q&A tab. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but we cannot guarantee that all questions will be answered given the number of people in attendance. Now, please enjoy your session. Welcome to the 2021 virtual convention. This session is part of the convention breakout program. Please note, this session will be.
Good day, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. My name is Mike McGovern. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Maine, in the United States, and I'm the moderator for today's panel. I'm doing that as the chair of the Rotary International Polio Plus Committee. This is our annual breakout on polio, and as you can see, we've entitled it this year, Achieving a Polio-Free World. We're very fortunate to have an excellent panel. The panel, as you can see here, first of all, includes Aidan O'Leary. Aidan is the fairly new director of polio eradication at the World Health Organization. He's started that position in January, but he's worked on polio quite a bit of time. Following Aidan will be Judith Diamond. Judith is the coordinator of the National Advocacy Advisors. She's a member of the Rotary Club of Maidenhead, Thames in the United Kingdom. We also have John Jerm. John, we all know, is a past president of Rotary International, is the incoming chair of the trustees of the Rotary Foundation, and is also the chair of the End Polio Now fundraising campaign. He's a member of the Rotary Club of Chattanooga, Tennessee. So welcome, everyone. I think we'll have a good session. It will be very interesting. I, in particular, am interested in hearing from all three panelists as we go on. But it's always good to hear from the World Health Organization as one of the implementing partners. Before we go into the program itself, we do a number of awards each year. We meaning Rotary International, the Rotary Foundation. One of those awards is the International Service Award for a polio-free world. These awards are given from nominations from district governors around the world. This year, in addition to some regional service awards, we have 3 recipients of the International Service Award. The first I'd like to mention is Norman Abbasi. Norman works very closely with the world's greatest meals. He was originally started this in Pakistan, but is a new permanent resident of Australia. He works just about full time, helping to keep track of all of the different events of the world's greatest meal, promoting it on social media, and just working with Susan Ray and others just does a tremendous job. Second is Shirley Griffin. Shirley is a past district governor from Texas, and specifically from District 5830. She's been an amazing fundraiser for polio eradication in her district and beyond. She attended a National Immunization Day in India, and we're really pleased to honor her as well. Third is John Ockenfels. John is from Iowa City, Iowa, and again, he's a just like Shirley. He's been actively involved for many years in polio eradication. But what really captured everyone's attention was during this past year, he planned to do a flight around the world for Polio Plus, raising money for polio. It didn't happen. But he had the dream, and he still plans to do it. And it's just amazing. What he's been able to accomplish. So I encourage you, if you know anyone who you think has done a lot of work for polio eradication, suggest to your district governor that that they send in some nominations to the International and Regional Service Awards for a polio-free year, polio-free world. I hope it's a polio-free year for the years 2021, 2022. And now I'd like to briefly, give you, things are going extremely well. I think, most of you are aware we've only had 2 polio cases worldwide. This year we'll be hearing more about that. What particularly affects, strikes me is that there hasn't been a single girl in the world, not one, who's come down with the wild polio virus since January 1. And, if that's not a sign of progress, I don't know what is. But, one of the other things that's happened is we have a new strategy. And it was adopted by the Polio Oversight Board, which is the governing board, recently. And I think, what it does, we've heard a lot about Rotary's action plan, but this is sort of the polio eradication action plan. And it reestablishes polio eradication as a public health emergency. It focuses on holding governments, agencies, and global partners, including Rotary, accountable. It rebalances capacity and decision-making between the headquarters of the various partners and the regional and country teams. It elevates gender equity as critical to achieving polio eradication. And it also prioritizes use of something Aidan's going to talk about, the novel oral polio vaccine, type 2 vaccine. That started to roll out. It's exciting, and this strategy rolls it out. In addition, there's also, within the strategy, a robust monitoring and evaluation component with established key performance indicators. So, it's exciting that we have this new strategy. Rotary, the leaders of Rotary and polio look forward to working on it. I know everyone, is particularly around the Rotary world, as we all hear more about it, we'll hear more about it. So, in one final thing I want to say, polio eradication is truly a program of Rotarians around the world. There's passion around the world, there's excitement around the world, the funding, the advocacy. So much of what we're going to talk about today comes from the advocacy and the great work, the financial support of Rotarians around the world. And I want to thank you for that. It never ceases to amaze me what Rotaries have done and continuing to do to eradicate polio. So with that, I'd like to introduce Aidan O'Leary. Aidan, as I said, is the Director of Polio Eradication for the World Health Organization. and he's going to be giving us an update on how we're going to be achieving the polio-free world we all aspire to. Aidan?
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the Rotarians joining this convention today. It's a very great honor and privilege for me to be able to address this forum. What I would like to do during the course of the next 15 minutes is to provide you with an overview of how we're progressing towards a polio-free world. Next slide, please. The first thing that I'd like to do is to outline the current state of play with wild polio virus. You see two graphics on the screen. The first is showing what's been happening with the wild polio virus over the course of the last 12 months. The one on the bottom right shows what's been happening over the course of the past 6 months. And I think the good news is that what we see overall is that wild polio virus remains restricted to just 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And we've seen 140 cases recorded during the course of 2020, with almost 60% of environmental isolates recorded during the same period. But now, as we look at the last 6-month period from the end of December, what we basically see is just 2 cases. I repeat, 2 cases that we've recorded over the last 6 months. And we've seen a commensurate drop in the number of environmental positive isolates from sewage recorded as well. So what we have is really, really encouraging epidemiology that we now have an opportunity to finally finish the job. Next slide, please. Now we move very quickly to circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus, which is the second major goal for the eradication program. And what we saw was a very, very difficult year during the course of 2020, where over the course of the 12 months, we recorded almost 1,100 cases of wild poliovirus distributed across more than 22 countries. What we've begun to see following the resumption of campaigns in the latter part of 2020 is a sharp reduction in the overall number of cases, with just 100 cases recorded to date in 2021. And I think equally importantly is we've seen the number of countries impacted sharply reduce. And I think it's important to note that in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and neighboring Tajikistan, almost 60% of the cases globally are now concentrated in these 3 countries. So again, what we've seen is significant improvement in the epidemiology that we currently face. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do in this slide is just to show very, very briefly the situation in detail in relation to Afghanistan. What you see are the 2 main rows. The top row relates to the number of cases. Red denotes the wild poliovirus. Green denotes the circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus. In the middle column, what you have is the environmental samples. And again, what I would like to highlight is that we have more than 30 environmental sampling sites concentrated in Afghanistan to detect any form of transmission. And what we see very, very clearly is a consistent pattern and trend of reduction, with the last case of wild poliovirus detected in Ghazni in January of this year, and the last environmental sample that was detected for wild poliovirus recorded in February of this year. We have been unable to detect the virus in Afghanistan since that time. This is encouraging news, but I would highlight that we face 2 major risks. One is that our significant numbers of children, running into millions, remain inaccessible to the program as a result of bans imposed by the Taliban on house-to-house campaigns. And secondly, what we've seen in our recent months is rising levels of violence, which is resulting in increasing numbers of displaced populations, which at the moment remain displacements within Afghanistan, but we face a risk that this may move across international borders into Pakistan, Iran, or possibly into the countries to the north, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Next slide, please. This is the situation in relation to Pakistan. And again, we take a similar format. And again, what we see is this very, very encouraging epidemiology. In terms of cases, the only case we've recorded in 2021 was in Kili Abdullah in Balochistan in January of this year. What we've basically seen since that period of time on the environmental positives is a consistent pattern of very, very sharp reductions, with roughly 20% of all samples in 2021 as recorded as positive. But as you will see from the data itself, of the 100 samples that have been taken in April and May, just 2 of these samples have been positive for wild poliovirus. So again, what we see is our great cause for encouragement. But we would highlight there are no grounds for complacency. And what the program really needs to focus on during the course of the coming quarters is to relentlessly focus on the still missed children located in the core reservoirs of Pakistan, namely Peshawar and Khyber, Karachi, and the Quetta block in Balochistan. So again, we are in a really positive position, but as with all opportunities, we need to grasp it. And as Prime Minister Imran Khan explained to the POB delegation during the course of our meeting last week, now is the time for the program to demonstrate a killer instinct and finish off the virus once and for all. Next slide, please. What I wanted to do with this slide was to simply draw your attention to the importance of the new vaccine, novel OPV2, which we are seeking to introduce and deliver to support our outbreak response. We received the first ever emergency use listing issued by WHO in November of last year. And what we're seeking to do is to expedite the rollout of this vaccine to as many countries at risk as we possibly can. This vaccine has been under development for nearly 10 years. It is as effective as all of the vaccines that we currently have in use, but critically, it is much more genetically stable, which means that it's less likely to revert to a form that can cause paralysis in under-immunized communities. So we're really working to prioritize this as the vaccine of preference. Next slide, please. This is where we currently stand. We have more than 32 countries working to meet the various readiness and preparedness requirements to be met to use the vaccine. 25 in Africa, 1 in Europe, 6 in the Middle East. We have 7 countries that have been fully verified, and the remainder countries, as you can see, are rapidly progressing to basically meet those requirements for use. And in short, since March of this year, more than 50 million doses of vaccine have been allocated without any major adverse incidents recorded to date. So I think, again, what we're seeing is really, really good momentum, and we very much hope to build on that during the course of the remainder of this year. Next slide, please. Sorry. Thank you. So in this slide, what I would like to basically talk to is the new GPI strategy that was launched by the Polio Oversight Board in Islamabad in Pakistan last year. Firstly, why did we need a new strategy? Very simply, we weren't making sufficient progress towards eradication. And what was really required was a very sharp review of the kind of key elements of the strategy that had not been addressed. And these range from emergency posture to collective engagement, to our own internal structures, to our broader epidemiological needs, as well as the new elements that were coming for COVID, a tightening financial environment, as well as the NOPV2 introduction. And we've had a fairly intense and robust consultation process involving more than 300 stakeholders to develop the strategy, which has now been released. Next slide, please. What are the two overarching elements that we're seeking to bring about? The first is in relation to emergency focus and essentially re-establishing polio eradication as a public health emergency and priority of the highest order, and to hold both governments and partners accountable for rapid progress. As we've seen very clearly during COVID, when we see this emergency focus with the whole of government approach, with real-time decision-making on data and our accountability for follow-up, things happen. Our implementation proceeds afresh. We are looking to reapply that to the polio eradication program. And then secondly, what we're seeking to do is to strengthen our collective engagement, recognizing that for the communities that we serve, for the communities that we are seeking to reach the most, we need to be working much more comprehensively and systematically to really bring all of the expertise to bear to ensure a broader range of their needs are more systematically addressed. And linked to this, what we're also seeking to do is to decentralize decision-making and capacities as close to the front line as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So when we speak to the kind of core elements of the strategy, we have 5 strategic objectives: political advocacy, community engagement, our better frontline campaigns, integration, and surveillance. So when we speak to the first goal, which is all about reducing wild polio virus to 0 and sustaining that, what we've identified are 2 key priorities for political advocacy. The first is to gain and maintain access in Afghanistan to reach those children that are currently inaccessible to the program. And then secondly, when it comes to Pakistan, what we're seeking to do is to intensify advocacy, not with the federal governments, but with the provincial governments, to really make sure that at the front line, in the union councils of highest concern to the program, we really are getting the most attention and the best results. When it comes to, for instance, something like integration, what we're also seeking to do is to really target support, whether it is routine immunization outreach, whether it's nutrition, whether it's WASH, towards inaccessible children in those, or particularly the southern regions of Afghanistan, but also really working to make sure that we are targeting the still missed children in the highest risk union councils within the core reservoirs of Pakistan. So it's not a general program, it's a highly targeted program focused on the missed children lens. Next slide, please. One of the key charges that was placed against the last strategy is that we weren't sufficiently robust in relation to key performance indicators, milestones, and timelines. So what we're seeking to do in this regard is to really strengthen our performance management, our risk management, and also that drive towards the timelines, where we seek to interrupt wild polio virus by no later than 2023, and to have certification by no later than 2026. And what we will be seeking to do is to really have quarterly reviews to ensure that we are on target, and where we are drifting off target, to make the necessary course corrections in a timely way to bring us back on track. Next slide, please. For goal 2, what we are seeking to do is to stop CDV-TBV transmission and prevent our outbreaks in non-endemic countries. And again, we have the same 5 strategic objectives, but their goals are different when it comes to managing outbreaks. For political advocacy, what we're seeking to do is to engage government and political stakeholders to adopt a national a declaration of a public health emergency and acting commensurate with that status. When it comes to elements such as integration, what we recognize is that of the 1,600 children that have been paralyzed by CVDBVs since 2016, more than 90% have been 0 dose for IPV. So the solution for the program is not just about our addressing and responding to the outbreaks in the form of cures, but what we will be working to do is to strengthen essential immunization to prevent those outbreaks taking place in the first instance. So again, what we're seeking to do is to be much more comprehensive, much more systematic. Next slide, please. Again, what we're seeking to do is to take this these objectives and apply key performance indicators, risk management, milestones, as well as the timelines that you see elaborated. And what we're seeking to do here is really to make sure that we do interrupt circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus by no later than 2023, and to validate its absence by the end of 2026. And again, I think the important point here is that we want to be very focused, very, very targeted to the core of the problems that are there, and managing these milestones to ensure that we remain on track. Next slide, please. One of the key elements that we've sought to address in this program, or in this strategy document, is the critical role of gender. And I think it's important to recognize that the single most important relationship for the program is between the frontline vaccinator who knocks on the door of a household and the caregiver that answers at the other end. What the program has sought to do is to ensure that the frontline vaccinator that knocks is a female vaccinator. And we know that the vast majority of our caregivers who will be answering that knock will be the mother of the children. And what we want to do is to really make sure that everything and anything we can do to strengthen that relationship, support that relationship, we are seeking to do it as effectively and efficiently as we can, because we recognize that that maximizes our prospects for vaccinating every single child in that household. So supporting the role of females at all levels of the program is not just an equality issue, it's a program imperative. We will not succeed unless we're able to do this everywhere and anywhere that the program operates. Next slide, please. In this particular slide, what I wanted to touch upon very, very briefly are the themes of partnership, performance, and accountability. And in the graphic on the left, what you basically see is a range of different levels, starting with the pointy end, which is basically our frontline vaccinators and surveillance staff, followed by our country programs, our regional support, our global support, and ultimately the member states of the World Health Assembly. But each of those bubbles represents the variety and the diversity of the partners that we work with in the polio eradication program. And what we are basically seeking to do is that as a partnership, we need to be fully unified to provide our frontline vaccinators with every prospect of success every single time they knock on the door of a household, so that they succeed, and thus we all succeed. Again, very, very simple in a graphic. We are working to make sure that we match that in our implementation and in our practice. On the right-hand side, we've also recommitted ourselves to accountability. And this accountability pillar runs through all the different levels of the program. So for the non-endemic country programs, it's the frameworks for supporting outbreak response. For the endemic countries, it's the framework supporting their national emergency action plans. At the global level, we're looking at our monitoring and evaluation framework with key performance indicators and risk management. We have our independent bodies, which is the IMB, chaired by Sir Liam Donaldson. It's our strategic advisory group of experts who advise us on vaccines, as well as the global and regional certification commissions. And then last but not least, we have the member state bodies that constitute the World Health Assembly. But more fundamentally than that, we all ultimately owe our accountability to all of the children of the world to ensure that none anywhere are exposed to this highly infectious communicable disease. Next slide, please. And this brings me then to my last slide, which is the cover page of our new strategy, our document, which is entitled Delivering on a Promise. And I think it's really important to note that the child has her finger has a purple mark. As some of you will be aware, there is a reference to a pinky promise. This is not a pinky promise. We really need to finish the job this time round, and we are fully committed to do so. So on that note, I'd like to pass the floor back to you, Mike. And again, thanks for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much, Aidan. I think we have time for one quick question from a member of the panel. Judith, I understand you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Aidan, I wonder if you can explain the impact of COVID in Pakistan and Afghanistan on the program, and also any aspects that has helped polio become more contained during the last 6 months.
Thanks, Judith, for that question. So clearly, the impact of the pandemic in the initial stages was quite adverse to the program, with both our surveillance activities and our campaign operations suspended for periods of 3 to 4 months. I'm very, very pleased to report that what we've seen from August onwards is a full resumption of campaign activities in both Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as a resumption of all surveillance activities. So I think the program, has continued to build momentum, and I think much of the situation in which we find ourselves is down to the courageous actions and decisions taken by governments, partners, and particularly frontline workers to resume those activities. I think we are also seeing some hidden benefits from the pandemic at this point in time as a result of reduced mobility. So these levels have sharply reduced both within Afghanistan and Pakistan and across the borders. We have seen improved social distancing as well as improved hand washing. And while the impacts are not fully clear, there is no doubt that that has contributed to the very, very positive epidemiology that we see at this point in time. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you, Judith, for the question. I also want to note the chat in the live breakout. I really want to thank Haresh, Jackson, Dave, Janine, Salawak, Andrew, and others for your comments. We're reading them all, and although the technology doesn't allow us to address them directly online, live, we appreciate the comments. I'd now like to move on to the next slides. And remember to deliver on that promise. I love that slide. I love the cover. Aidan, thank you for that. We're making progress in Afghanistan. As you can see from these slides, it takes tough work. But in the end, everything is about getting those polio drops into the mouths. And as we move on to the next slide, you'll see that these are the individuals we depend on so much. These are the polio workers, what we call the frontline workers. Sadly, a few months ago, three of them, not in this photo, but 3 of the frontline polio workers lost their lives. And what I always think of, what we're asked to do compared to what the frontline workers do. It's such an amazing contribution. On the next slide, you'll see. We use all forms to try to get to people. Here you see the polio cold chest donated by Rotary, and you see these 2 women delivering polio drops on a woman on a river, across the river. And you'll see this mother session in the next slide. That's what it takes. And it's, we also at transit points, you can go to the next slide again. On these transit slides, on the next slide. we appear to have frozen. The next slide, we have these transit points, and those are very important. They're provided by the Pakistan Polio Plus Committee, and again, it's just getting those drops, and that's what we're all about. So they're making good progress there. It never ceases to amaze me, the great work being done by Rotarians in Pakistan, Afghanistan, as well as particularly in Africa and so many other places where we're trying to deal with these vaccine-derived cases. We're now going to move on to Judith Diamond. Judith is going to give a presentation on advocacy in the COVID-19 context. And Judith, again, thanks for all the work you're doing, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mike, and greetings, Rotarians and guests from England. I'm delighted to be here to share with you how we're doing polio advocacy in the context of COVID-19. And as with all aspects of our lives, Rotary's Polio's national advocacy advisors have had to adjust and adapt advocacy efforts to meet the new restrictions on in-person, face-to-face meetings. Fortunately, we have still been quite successful in engaging with key policymakers despite the limitations on in-person interaction. In some cases, the virtual format has actually made it a bit easier to bring together people whose travel schedules were often difficult to coordinate. And we have managed to organize many high-level virtual parliamentary sessions and partner meetings to brief officials in most of our key markets to ensure polio remains top of the agenda. Next slide, please. We've increased our use of social media as a key tool to engage with policymakers, particularly around key moments and milestones. The certification of the eradication of wild poliovirus from the African region was one such milestone, and it provided an excellent opportunity for our key donors to share some rare good news about their investment in global health, and many of them specifically recognized collaboration with Rotary in that effort. The images you see on this screen are from prominent members of the US Congress and the German minister responsible for polio funding. They both issued a video statement recognizing the certification milestone. Celebratory acknowledgements were also issued by many key donors, including Canada, Germany, Japan, Norway, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Next slide, please. Key moments like World Polio Day and World Immunization Week also provide strategy opportunities to engage with policymakers to highlight progress and Rotary's continued commitment. In some cases, this takes the form of parliamentarian or other official posts and tweets, recognizing the work of constituents, like the post that you see on the left from a Canadian Member of Parliament. In others, Rotarians organize virtual events featuring key government officials. And the photo on the right was from a World Polio Day virtual event that featured the participation of the UK Secretary of State for International Development, Wendy Morton, who also happens to be a Rotarian. Just as a social media kit is prepared for use by Rotarians to raise awareness, sample advocacy tweets are prepared to highlight key progress points about the impact of polio eradication and the work of Rotary, which officials can easily use or adapt. And this helps highlight the issue while also demonstrating engagement to their constituents, and has been a powerful and fairly easy way to engage with officials. Next slide, please. World Immunization Week, held during the last week of April, also provided another opportunity for engagement with officials. And one particularly good example of engagement happened in Canada, where an informal 20-minute Zoom interview was organized by an MP who knows our president-elect, president nominee and Canada Advocacy Task Force Chair, Jennifer Jones. The interview was held with Karina Gould, Canada's Minister for International Development, who posted the entire interview on her Facebook and Instagram channels, and also shared an excerpt on Twitter. The interview provided an excellent summary of Rotary's efforts on polio eradication. and how those efforts are now informing Rotary's COVID-19 pandemic response activities. The Minister also spoke personally about the value of Rotary's engagement, an excerpt of which you see quoted on the slide here. Next slide, please. So we have adapted. We'll need to continue to be flexible as we work to encourage continued financial and political commitments. We've always faced competition for limited funding and attention, and that competition is even greater in this time of COVID, which has impacted all countries. Governments are focused first and foremost on their own citizens. Some countries have already announced budget cuts for aid in response to financial constraints. But it's not all bad news. There is a much greater understanding of many of the issues Rotary has discussed as part of its polio eradication-related advocacy. We are all much more personally familiar with the concepts of how easily viruses can be transmitted, the importance of surveillance and contact tracing. Rotary and the GPEI have a long and strong track record of addressing vaccine hesitance and building community trust. We have experience in what it takes to support mass vaccination clinics and are able to bring that experience to support COVID vaccination efforts. In sum, our voice and experience remains relevant, credible, and vital to end polio, and helps us navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. As we've heard earlier, the GPEI launched its strategy for 2022 to 26 last week, and Rotary's advocacy will be vital to ensuring we position the programme to succeed in meeting the challenges of the current global public health context. We have existing pledges that were made during and following the 2019 pledging conference in Abu Dhabi, and Rotary and its partners are working to realise all of those existing pledges and to bring in new commitments. An investment case is being prepared to support this advocacy and is anticipated to be completed by late July or August. Early cost modelling to fully implement GPEI's new strategy and stop transmission of all polioviruses is projected as up to US $5 billion over the next 5 years. A more thorough and detailed budget is being developed in the third quarter of 2021. Rotary's advocacy remains vital to ensure we keep polio in the spotlight by reminding governments of the tremendous progress that has been made, which has been threatened by COVID pandemic-related disruptions, even as the polio infrastructure and assets have played a key role in addressing the pandemic. It is in our common interest to ensure we protect and build upon the incredible global resource that we have developed in the GPEI so we can end polio once and for all. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you very much, Judith. The advocacy is so important. The fundraising is so important, as John Germ will soon speak on. But before I introduce John, as Judith was speaking, I received an email from Pakistan, from Aziz Memon, and let me just read the first paragraph of it. In the past week, no new wild polio case reported. The total number of wild polio cases in 2021 remains 1 from 1 district compared to 59 cases from 30 districts during 2020 at the same point in time. This is why we advocate. This is why we fundraise. It's so that these children around the world do not get the wild polio virus. We did have 8 vaccine-derived cases in Pakistan, so we still clearly have more work to do, and we're not out of the woods yet. We need to be persistent at getting this done. One of the areas we need to be persistent is fundraising. And I'm very pleased to introduce once again past President John Germ. John is the best polio advocate for eradication that eradication could ever have. So John, we look forward to your report on fundraising. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about something that's dear to all of our hearts, and that's the eradication of polio. So, as you know, we have a contract with the Gates Foundation that if we do $50 million a year that they will give us $100 million, which gives Rotary $150 million to advocate for the eradication of polio. One of the nice things about the $100 million is that that comes to Rotary. It's up to Rotary through the IPPC and through the trustees in order to allocate those funds, which are mostly allocated to the WHO and to UNICEF. From this graph, you can see that how we spend our $150 million, and we have a proposal going to the trustees from the IPPC later this week, or which will talk about allocating another $51 million toward the eradication of polio. On raising awareness, and that raising awareness is to look at things like soap and water and the importance of proper sanitation and proper hand washing facilities, to let people know that we do have eradication